Hi, Cora Stack here. I just wanted to relaunch my campaign because it was down for a number of weeks due to a technical error, and it's called Save the Separation of Powers, Protect Democracy. And just to what it is it's about my campaign. Again, it's called Save the Separation of Powers, Protect Democracy, a Constitutional Campaign for Ireland. It sounds ambitious. It certainly is. So my name is Dr. Cora M. Stack, as you know, and I'm relaunching the constitutional campaign called Save the Separation of Powers, Protect Democracy. Now that sounds very highfalutin, but let's try and explain what it's about. This campaign was paused for a short time due to a technical issue. It's now back up and active again. And I want to thank everybody who has contributed so far, previously anonymously. I mean, it's I really appreciate all offers of support here because it's extremely challenging. And even to have the moral backing in the support is very good. Not even the financial backing, just to have. So the constitutional proceedings at the centre of this campaign are currently before the Court of Appeal in Ireland and the Supreme Court of Ireland. Now, the Supreme Court of Ireland, they have been adjourned pending determination of a related case, which was involving Mr. Byrne, which concerns one similar constitutional issue. However, my case relies on the following constitutional provisions, in particular Article 12. That's the main anchor of, we'll say, the question one. In particular, Article 6 and 1, Articles 28A and Article 34. But the core of the first question rests heavily on Article 12. Under the Constitution of Ireland, Ireland is built on a separation of powers. The legislature makes the law, the executive administers the law, and the judiciary interprets the law. And sovereignty rests with the people. That's Article 6. If the separation of powers weakens, democracy weakens. If constitutional processes are not applied faithfully, public trust erodes. The campaign seeks to safeguard that constitutional balance, and it's very hard to explain how important it is that we have a separation of powers, and in particular that the Supreme Court, have that, or feel that they have. They have those powers to. It's really designed to keep a check on power. So that's really why we have this. The separation of powers, because it's about checking, a mechanism where the overreach of power by the executive can be checked if it occurs. So it is a checks and balances, but it is absolutely essential that is as wide as possible and in accordance with the Constitution. So the four constitutional questions, as I'm looking at them at the moment, are: number one, I just put it very briefly now. There are other ways of putting this, but inverted commas, the inverted commas constitutionality of the 2025 presidential nomination process. At the centre is Article 12, which governs the presidency. The presidency is not symbolic alone. It is a constitutional office created directly by the people, and that's important. It is an office created by the people. If the presidential process does not fully comply with Article 12, then that raises profound constitutional questions. This is about constitutional integrity, nothing about personalities. The constitutionality of electoral processes. The second question examines whether electoral processes and its consequences align with the same principles: Article 6, Article 28A, Article 35, and if citizens cannot meaningfully vindicate constitutional rights, the separation of powers becomes theoretical rather than real. The third question is very theoretical. So this one was fascinating for me to investigate. Procedural techniques that limit constitutional challenges. Now this really was very challenging. The third issue concerns whether procedural mechanisms can be used or are used intentionally or structurally in ways that prevent constitutional issues from being fully heard in time, particularly in time sensitive elections such as presidential elections. I mean, this is very complex. A democracy must allow constitutional questions to be tested transparently and in particular in time. Adjournments, standing barriers and procedural filtering must not function as constitutional gatekeeping beyond what the Constitution permits. And that took me months and months to understand, and there are a number of papers that I've written to try and explain the complexity there. And finally, I have a question about the current Irish protective disclosures and democratic accountability. The fourth issue concerns protective disclosures. Citizens who raise governance or constitutional concerns, a good question, must not be disadvantaged or penalised for doing so. Accountability strengthens democracy, silence weakens it. Why this matters. This campaign is not about me or one case. It is about whether an ordinary citizen, you, me, or your family, or any member of your family or relatives, an ordinary person can rely on the Constitution equally. Many feel excluded from power. Many feel constitutional rights are difficult to vindicate in practice and are available for the elite and not available for the ordinary citizen in practice. If successful, this case could clarify the constitutional requirements regarding presidential elections, the limits of electoral processes or legislation, the boundaries of judicial gatekeeping, the real meaning of popular sovereignty under Article 6. Ireland comes first because this is our constitution, but separation of powers and constitutional democracy are global principles. So this actually, particularly introducing question 3 there, isn't has implications beyond Ireland. It's a global. There's a global question here about constitutional challenges in time-sensitive presidential elections, which has emerged from this case, which is it's extremely complex and very challenging, and it's not shocking, but it's just surprising that this has emerged from the research on this. So I want to acknowledge Maureen Kenny, and alongside Maureen Kenny, and through extensive independent research, enormous work has gone into examining these issues rigorously. So this is not a political movement, but it's a kind of a research challenge, but it's essentially a constitutional one. So if you believe the Constitution must be applied faithfully, the separation of powers must be preserved, the ordinary citizen must be equal before the law. So let me say that again. If you believe the ordinary citizen should be equal or treated equally before the law, democracy requires real access to justice, then I ask you for your support. This is a GoFundMe campaign because constitutional litigation requires resources, but also requires kind of moral, kind of backup, kind of moral backup. There's that side of it as well. We're seeking clarity. We're seeking fidelity to the Constitution. We are seeking. I know it's a big, huge question or a huge demand of a court, to start what we want as a democratic reset. I mean, this is a huge challenge, to ask the Supreme Court to say we in Ireland need a democratic reset. It's not just we; most of the Western democracies do. So it's a huge it really is a huge responsibility to put on a court to say, sorry, our democracy is in decline, and that is in line with a lot of democracies, constitutional democracies. There hasn't been sufficient correction, in my opinion, going back many years, and it's time for a reset. So this is a huge. You overwhelm the court really asking this question, but somebody has to answer it, and they have the abilities we have. I think we have very good people in these courts that can tackle these questions. We are seeking to save the separation of powers and protect democracy. The link is below, and thank you very much. And as again, thank you all for all your fantastic comments and support on this channel. And it hasn't been easy. It's very, very challenging. And I have to say, we have found both the Supreme Court and the Court of Appeals very, very helpful in terms of assisting us, trying to make our case and do the best they can for us. But of course, everything has to be within the boundaries of the law, and everything has to be put in a way that is precise, accurate, rigorous, constitutionally acceptable, etc., etc. So for litigants and persons, it's extraordinarily challenging. But we have done a huge amount of research, and I have hugely enjoyed the constitutional research, particularly on question 3 and the doctrines and the techniques and all of that, and that's been absolutely mind-blowingly interesting. But nevertheless, it's the effect that we'd hope that this could lead to a democratic reset and more accountability, in particular transparency in these kind of situations and going forward. And this is very important for democracy, and particularly in light of the huge spoil campaign, vote campaign, and those who didn't choose. There is a huge sense that democracy is not working for people at the moment, and people are under enormous strain, as I've kind of mentioned. They feel they're taking too much of the pressure of the wealth is going from ordinary working people up to, and we just saw today in breaking news, how the top percentage are getting wealthier in Ireland. It's exactly the same in America. And I have nothing against, people doing successful in business, absolutely nothing, but not at the expense of putting the majority under enormous pressure. Not at that expense. That's too high a price to pay, and there is a balance, and I think the balance is gone askew. So I know it's a lot to expect that this case would end up in a better balance between the haves and the have-nots, but that's what we'd like to have at the end of it. More accountability, more transparency, but in particular accountability.